Hi, everybody. Uh, Welcome to week two. We're going to read Act Two of Macbeth. And before we get started, I thought I would just say a couple things about some of the great work that I've seen you do. It's been really great to see everybody really engage with the text, and I hope these videos are helping you. Oh gosh, my hair looks silly. It's a bit silly to uh, be constantly looking at yourself while you read a play. I have great respect for actors now who have to look at cameras. Uh, but so it's been really great to interact with you and see the work you're doing. One thing I really want to emphasize is that just looking at the quotes that you're choosing and writing about, I really would like to emphasize that I want you to be working with writing about the poetic imagery. And the reason why is that ultimately the skill we need to work on is theme and character development. And so to understand why the characters do what they're doing, we really need to analyze the poetry. Why does Macbeth decide to kill Duncan at the end of Act One, for example? You could say, well, Lady Macbeth convinced him to do so, but how did she do it? And one of the things that we'll see is that all the time in this play, characters are using really powerful imagery to try to convince each other to do stuff. And I really want to look at what kind of images are really powerful, what kind of images create passion and drive us to act the way we act. What kind of images make us ignore our conscience and pursue power? Because those are the two themes that we've been discussing. Yes? Good. And so, one other thing, just a logistical thing I want you to be doing is in the little chart, as you saw for Act One, I had you just do from scenes 1 through 3, from scenes 4 and 5, from scenes 6 and 7. And I haven't really done that for the other acts, divided it up, but I want you to do that. So I'd really like you to just go really quickly right now. You can pause the video and just add scene 1, scene 2, scene 3. You're welcome to write about scene 3 and 4, but scene 4 is a bit like it's a bit of an extra scene. It's not very important in the play, and it's a scene that directors will often cut when they do productions of it. So it's not that important for us, and I really want to focus on scene 1, 2, and 3 because that's where the big stuff happens. When we left off, um, remember, Macbeth had decided to kill the king. After he decided not to, Lady Macbeth challenged him, told him he wasn't being courageous, he was breaking his promise, and then showed him a way that he could do it without getting caught. And that without getting caught thing seems pretty important for us as far as why does Macbeth pursue power? Why does he ignore his conscience? Remember, there's this whole theme about ignoring, hiding. Stars, hide your fire. Let not light see their black and deep desire. That's what Macbeth says. So he wants to hide it. And as you can see, then, this theme of darkness and light is really important in the play. And Act Two opens as Banquo and his son Fleance. Oh, we're meeting a son. And this is really important. Why? Because if you remember, the witches had said that Macbeth will become king, but Banquo's son will become king. So now we're meeting the future king, at least according to this prophecy. And so Act Two opens as Banquo and his son Fleance enter Macbeth's candle at night, holding torches. So it is dark. And something very bad is going to happen at night. So this is right before Macbeth is about to do this horrible deed. And that's where we open. And so that's where Act Two begins. And, this is not the beginning of Act Two. Let me go to it. Here we are. And so we have enter Banquo and Fleance with a torch before him. So in other words, he's holding a torch. Maybe there's a servant holding a torch. That's also possible. A torch could be a torch, or it could be a person holding a torch. But either way, it's very dark because Banquo says, "How goes the night, boy?" And Fleance says, "The moon is down. I have not heard the clock." Banquo says, "And she goes down at 12. Fleance says, "I take 'tis later, sir." So in other words, they're talking about not only that it's dark, but also that it's late. And also, they're talking about what time it is. And they're thinking about the relationship between time, like human time, like right now it's 11:07 on Thursday for me, but also about its relationship to nature. It's kind of an interesting theme in the play. Like, is time really in nature, or is it just a human construct? That's the kind of question that's coming up here. And so they're saying it's after the moon has set, so it must be kind of late. And Banquo says, oh, she goes down at 12 today, like the moon, as in she being the moon, goes down at 12. And so Fleance like, yeah, so it's after 12. It's late at night. And Banquo says something interesting. He says, hold, take my sword. So he gives Fleance here his sword. Hold just means wait a second. And he gives him his sword. He says, there's husbandry in heaven. Their candles are all out. Take thee that too. And so this is an interesting line. Husbandry is the act of taking care of animals like livestock or cows or sheep. It's like managing your flock. And so it's kind of an interesting word. Husband means you take care of your family in the same way you might take care of your cows or your sheep, which is kind of messed up that we still use that word, but that's what husbandry is. And the candles are all out, like the candles of heaven. Like it's so dark you can't even see any stars. So here candles and stars are connecting. Candles in the play are also really important because they symbolize light. What is light? What is dark? What is good? What is bad? And take thee that too means maybe he's also giving him something else, maybe another torch, because he's saying it's so dark. And now he says something about how he's feeling. He says, a heavy summons lies like lead upon me, and yet I would not sleep. Oh, this is a really interesting image. So you could write about this image. Again, I just want to repeat that when you're taking these notes and choosing images to write about, I want you to choose images when I say, hey, that's a really interesting image. Well, this is a really interesting image, because he's saying he feels like a summons is a burden. He feels like something's lying on him, like lead is really heavy. So he feels like something really is heavy on him, yet he cannot sleep. So he feels burdened and like it's like weighing him down, yet when he lies down, he can't sleep. And now he speaks to God, maybe, or angels. He speaks to merciful powers. Mercy is like getting help from someone more powerful. So he's saying, merciful powers, restrain me in the cursed thoughts that nature gives way to in repose. And in repose means at rest. So he's like, when I'm trying to rest, when I'm trying to sleep, I'm having these cursed thoughts that are coming to me. And so what are those cursed thoughts? We don't know, but maybe they're the same kind of cursed thoughts that Macbeth is having. These thoughts about becoming king, about power, conscience. Banquo is feeling conscience. And we've already seen that, remember that whereas Macbeth was all stunned by the witch's prophecy, Banquo is more skeptical. And here again, he feels conscience. But here comes somebody, and it says, in my text, it says, enter Macbeth and a servant with a torch. But maybe the idea would be that Banquo can't see who it is, because he says to his son, give me my sword. Who's there? He doesn't see. And Macbeth says something interesting. He says, a friend. And this is going to be a question like, is it a friend? What is a friend? What does it mean to be a friend? Just that one idea is really important. And Banquo's surprised he's still awake. He says, what, sir? Not yet at rest? The king's abed, like the king's in bed. Why aren't you in bed? And he says, he hath been an unusual pleasure, and sent forth great largesse to your offices. Largesse is generosity. So he's like, the king has had a great time tonight, and he's giving you lots of money. And apparently Banquo has another gift for him. He says, this diamond, he holds up a diamond and says, this diamond he greets your wife withal. So he's like, he also wants to give you a diamond. So apparently Banquo's been hanging out with the king. The king's given money to Macbeth, but the king also gave Banquo a big diamond to give to Lady Macbeth. by the name of most kind hostess, and shut up in measureless content. So he's given this diamond because she's the best hostess, which of course is really ironic because of what we know, that she's not the best hostess. And now the king is shut up, like he's in his room, in measureless content. Like he's so happy, you can't even measure how content he is, how happy. And Macbeth says, being unprepared, our will became the servant to defect, which else should free have wrought. And he's like, well, we weren't even prepared, being unprepared. We did our best. Our will became the servant to defect. Like we worked really hard and we were a servant to our lack of stuff, which we would have done better. But Banquo's like, all's good. And then Fleance leaves for some reason. And Banquo says to Macbeth, now they can really talk about what happened. He says, I dreamt last night of the three weird sisters. To you, they have showed some truth. And Macbeth here clearly lies and says, oh, I don't think about the witches. I think not of them. Yet when we can entreat an hour to serve, we would spend it in some words upon that business if you would grant the time. So this is interesting. Macbeth is saying, well, I don't think about the witches, but maybe later we can talk about it and we'll discuss it. And Banquo's like, yeah, that sounds great, at your kindest leisure. Like whenever you want, we can talk about it. And Macbeth says, if you shall cleave to my consent when 'tis, it shall make honor of you. And this is interesting because maybe Macbeth is thinking about a plan, like after he kills the king, maybe he'll get an alliance with Banquo, because he's saying, you can cleave to my consent. And cleave here is like to cling to. Like your clothes cleave to your body. They cleave to my consent. And consent is like agreement. Like if you can agree with me, if you can really cling to me when it's time to talk about this, then it will make you honor. And Banquo says, yeah, I'll lose none. Like I'll lose no honor in seeking to augment it. And the it here is the honor. So they're talking about honor. And honor in Shakespeare is such an important word. Honor is about being true. It's about being honest. Honor and honest are really connected. So if we're interested in telling the truth, if we're interested in conscience and morality in the play, this is an interesting part. He's saying in seeking to augment, and augment means to add to. So he's saying in seeking to add to my honor, but still keep my bosom franchised and allegiance clear, I shall be counseled. So this is interesting because he's saying, I'll seek to honor I'll seek to add to my honor to you, but I'll keep my heart franchised. And that's a really striking word. Let's see the annotation here. So franchise means free, like not completely committed to Macbeth. Like I will stay committed to my heart and listen to what I know is true, and I'll keep my allegiance clear. So he's like, I'll honor you, but I won't completely give everything to you. And Macbeth says, all right, good, repose the while. Like, okay, go on, go rest. And Banquo says, thanks, sir, the like to you. And Banquo leaves. And now Macbeth is alone, and he has another soliloquy. And this is an amazing moment, because now he's about to go kill the king. And he has to kind of get up the nerve to do it. So he says to this servant, go bid thy mistress when my drink is ready, she strikes upon the bell. And it seems like the plan is she's going to strike the bell when it's time to go and kill the king, when the servants got all drunk. So when my drink is ready sounds like a sort of code. So he says to the servant, get thee to bed. And now this is a very famous moment. And here he hallucinates something. He sees in front of him a dagger floating. And sometimes in a play version, they'll have a dagger come down and float. And that seems kind of cheesy. I actually like to just imagine that Macbeth is just looking at empty air. And he sees a dagger and he says, is this a dagger which I see before me? The handle toward my hand. So he's like reaching out to grab it. Come, let me clutch thee. I have thee not, yet I see thee still. He's talking to the dagger. This is an amazing image. He's hallucinating a dagger. Art thou not? fatal vision, sensible to feeling as to sight. See, now he's still talking to the dagger. That's the thou and the thee. And art means are. So he's like, aren't you? Fatal means murderous, or of, could also be related to fate. But here it seems like he's saying he's having this vision of his fate. And he's asking it if it's sensible, if it's possible really to feeling as to sight. Like I can see it, that's one sense, but I can't feel it, that's another. Then he asks more, he's still talking to this dagger that he's hallucinating and seeing before him, and he says, or art thou but a dagger of the mind, a false creation proceeding from the heat oppressed brain? And this is a really interesting image, an interesting idea. It relates to this idea that they had about heat and cold and its relationship to emotions. Let's see what the editor of this ardent edition says. It means oppressed, feverish, but perhaps with reference to Galenic theories of physiology. And what that means is Macbeth is thinking about, they had this belief in, let me go back to here. They had this belief in the idea that your emotions had to do with this balance of fluids in your body, and that when you were feeling angry or violent, you had maybe too much heat. Anyway, he's still talking to this dagger. He says, I see thee yet in form as palpable as this which now I draw. And so he's saying, I see this dagger before me, and it's as palpable. Palpable means feeling, feelable, touchable. I can touch it. It seems as real as this which now I draw. So he takes out his own dagger. So maybe it's like this. He's like, because to draw is to take out a weapon. You can think about like in old Westerns, they would draw their weapons when they would have a shootout. And he's still talking now to this dagger he's seeing in front of him, and he says that it's marshaling him. Marshal means to lead the way, like a marshal in an army leads the way. So he says, thou marshalest me the way I was going, and such an instrument I was to use. So this dagger he's hallucinating is leading him to where he was going. And where was he going? To Duncan's room to kill him. So it's like he's having an hallucination that is helping him do this murder. And if you're interested in pursuing power, is he pursuing power? Or it seems like he's following something here. And if you're interested in morality, well, look how he needs to try to, it's like he's allowing something outside of him to guide him rather than maybe something inside of him. Anyway, so he's really kind of gone mad because he's following this imaginary dagger, which is taking him towards Duncan's room. And he says, mine eyes are made the fools of other senses, or else worth all the rest. So he's kind of saying, like, my eyes are either being tricked by all the other senses, which are showing me that the dagger is not real, or it's the best of all the senses. He says, I see thee still. He's still talking to this invisible dagger, or not invisible, this imaginary dagger, this hallucination. He's still talking to it, and he says, on thy blade, the dungeon gouts of blood, which was not so before. So he's saying on the blade, he sees little drops of blood, which wasn't there before. There's no such thing. And now it turns in an interesting way, because he says he sees the blood, and you're going to see this word blood so much in this play. This play is all about blood, because he's saying, I see the little drops of blood. And he says, it's the bloody business which informs to mine eyes. So now he's kind of seeing, he's like interpreting. He's saying that this hallucinated dagger is not real, but it's rather like a symbol of this violence, this bloody business. And I love that alliteration of bloody business. And so now he says something really amazing, because remember how dark it is. He says, now over the one half world nature seems dead, and wicked dreams abused the curtained sleep. Witchcraft celebrates pale Hecate's offering, and withered murder, alarmed by his sentinel, the wolf whose howls his watch, thus with his stealthy pace, with Tarquin's ravishing strides towards his design, moved like a ghost. Whoa. So he's having this hallucination and it's kind of getting him going. And then he has this really long sentence about how everything seems really evil. And if we just pick apart the sentence for a second, you can see that the beginning of it is now over the one half world, nature seems dead. So it's like, because it's so dark, nature seems dead. And then he has this kind of list of what else is going on that makes it all seem evil. And then he's saying moves like a ghost. So he gets to like nature is moving like a ghost or something. What does it really mean? Let me just talk through it more slowly. He says nature seems dead and wicked dreams abused the curtained sleep. And why is it curtained? Well, it's like when you're sleeping, you're behind a curtain and then you have these wicked dreams. And what one interesting maybe idea is that the curtain is like a curtain in a playhouse. So maybe that's part of the idea. And then he's saying witchcraft celebrates pale Hecate's offerings. And this is an important idea for later, but we've seen these witches, and what do they celebrate? Well, pale Hecate is the god of witchcraft. She is called Hecate, and we're going to even meet her later in the play. And so, and withered murder, what is withered murder? Withered murder is murdered imagined as an old man, a personification found nowhere else in Shakespeare. So it's like, again, let me just go back to the beginning of this. He's imagining murder as a person. So this is a great image. And then it's an old man who's been woken up by his guard. And who's the guard? A wolf whose howls his watch. So it's like he's saying that at night, murder is being woken up by a howling wolf that's running with his stealthy pace, with Tarquin's ravishing strides. So it's like this wolf is sprinting, this wolf that's the sentinel, the guard of murder, is sprinting at the same pace as the most horrible dictator, the most horrible tyrant in the history of Rome, this guy called Tarquin. And Tarquin was this horrible tyrant who killed all these people. And Shakespeare actually wrote this really long poem about how Tarquin raped a lady. And that poem is called The Rape of Lucrece. And so he's already written all about Tarquin. And Tarquin is just, in other words, this famous Roman evil guy. And so he's saying that it's nighttime is the time, and it's this elaborate image of witches and wolves and the most horrible tyrant in the history of Rome towards his design, running towards murder, and it's moving like a ghost. So all of this is supernatural. It's all about how it's this evil time of night. There's a sense in Shakespeare very often where evil happens at this time. They call it the witching hour. It's like when witchcraft takes place, and maybe also where evil happens. But if you're interested in how Macbeth is allowing himself to listen to ignore his conscience, to do evil, well, look how it's happening at this moment of nighttime where everything is still, nobody's awake, where you can really seem invisible. And now he speaks to the earth. He says, "Thou sure and firm set earth, hear not my steps." So he's talking to the earth, which is firm on the ground, and he's telling it not to hear his steps, which way they walk. Because remember, he's walking towards doing the evil. For fear the very stones prate of my whereabout. Prate means to talk about. So he's like, don't even let the stones talk about where I'm going, and take the present horror from the time which now suits it. So he's like, don't allow the horror that is happening right now to escape this moment and get into the future. So this focus on time is really important in the play, like I'm saying. And he's saying, let's keep all the evil in this one dark moment where there's all this crazy imagery. But there's so much amazing imagery in that soliloquy. I mean, that is an amazing soliloquy. And he says, whilst I threat, he lives. Words to the heat of deeds, too cold breath gives. And this is a difficult sentence, and he wants to, Shakespeare really likes to end uh, verse lines with verbs. It makes it very active. And look how it rhymes too. He gets lives and gives. And so he's saying, while I'm like threatening, I'm trying to build up. That's what he's been doing. All this stuff about now over the nature, one half, now over the world. What's the line? Now over, I can't say it. Over the one half world, nature seems dead, and the wicked dreams, and all this evil. He's saying that's actually him doing threatening. He's like building himself up to do the evil. But while he's doing that, Duncan still lives. So he's talking about how he's giving words to the heat of deed, but it's too cold. So if we rearrange it to make it easier, it's like words give to the heat of deed too cold breath. Gives too cold breath to the heat of deeds. That's how it should be. Words give too cold breath to the heat of deeds. Like it's not doing the action. He just needs to do it. And then he hears the bell. That's what he's been waiting for. He hears ding, ding. And he says, I go and it is done. Remember, he wanted it to be done. Remember that other soliloquy. He says, if it were done when it is done, then it were done quickly. Now he's going to do it. He says, I go and it is done. The bell invites me. Hear it not, Duncan, for it is a knell that summons thee to heaven or to hell. So again, he ends with this rhyming couplet. That's what Shakespeare really likes to do. Gives a lot of power. And he's talking to Duncan, the king. And a knell is the sound of a bell. Like each time it dings, that's one knell. So he's saying, don't hear it, Duncan, because it's going to summon you to heaven or hell. And that is the end of scene one. And I'm going to just do each kind of scene on its own. So you can do one scene at a time. I'm going to pause it and start the next one.